afternoon. I hope you've been enjoying the day. I've been to several talks so far, and they've all been really great. So I'm really pleased that I can stand between you and beer. When I was asked to talk, I was told, you have an hour and you can talk about whatever you want. And I thought, oh, that's so dangerous. Really, do you want me to do that? And then I thought, okay, I'm going to talk about identity, and I'm going to talk about privacy with identity, because I've spent the last far too long worrying about GDPR, because GDPR has caused all of us to rethink how we deal with identity, how we deal with an individual's private data. And I thought about it, and then I thought, I'm so done with that. GDPR and I, we're on a break right now. We're taking a break. And part of the reason I did that was I was reading, somebody passed this on to me right when I was trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to talk about identity? How am I going to talk about privacy and not mention GDPR? And I read this article and I thought, oh God, if these guys are getting it wrong, how can any of us get it right? And then I thought, this is the same as everybody in the world, right? Did not change the default password. This is the bloody Pentagon, folks. They couldn't change a default password. How many people want to bet that it was DB2 admin, right? That was my choice. But, okay, these guys aren't doing it. Problems were identified and then left unresolved. How many people have seen that happen before in their companies? And the camera doesn't count you, so you can put your hand up. And then the piece that just made me, quite frankly, bang my head against the desk. They believed their systems were secure and discounted some test results as unrealistic. How many people have seen that one happen? All the freaking time, folks. My teams come to me with their test results and they say, I'm good. Those are all false positives. Nobody will ever exercise that. It's a false positive. I say, no, that's not what a false positive means. So I was reading this article and then I decided, okay, I have a weekly gathering where I get about 50 of my security focals together, and I ask them, and we've been working through the entire development life cycle over the last 6 months, and we have, tabletops and water cooler sessions. And I asked what I thought was going to be a really simple question. I said, tell me about your security test discipline. Describe what you test for and how you test. I was hoping that I was going to walk out of that meeting with a nice long list of things that people test for. So if I ask you that, I don't want you to, well, you can shout out the answers if you want to. If I asked you that question, how many people here would actually know how to answer that one? Because I got to tell you, this is what I got. These are crickets. Okay. And this is not a quiet group that I deal with, right? They're pretty vocal. There's usually 7 people talking all over each other. And then I had the one character doing the jazz hands, right? You guys, everybody's got one of those. And then I had somebody else telling me that their testing was so great, it was the best testing ever, and that kind of died down. And then I had somebody who was the closest to kind of reality, which is, okay, we use all these tools and we run code scans, and that's how we test. And I thought, okay, guys, that's not enough, right? Maybe I'm old school, but when I grew up, you had unit test, you had functional test, you had system test, and okay, granted that's a waterfall model, but there were very, very explicit test phases that you had to go through. And you knew how to test. So I said, okay, let's talk then about how do you fit testing into your development discipline, right? Let's surface what this means in the DevOps world. And I got a little tiny voice saying, we use automation. And I thought, okay, again, we're missing the point. I'm either not asking the question right, or something's going wrong. So I said, okay, fine, tell me about your testing. And the answers that I got, and I think these are probably pretty typical answers, and I apologize, the font looked a lot bigger when I was testing this. But I was told, well, I include tests as part of my build process, so I know I'm building good code. And I said, okay, you're building good code. It might not be 100% accurate. And there was a talk 2 sessions ago, I think it was at 2 o'clock. Ken, I don't know if he is in here or not, but Ken gave a great talk on coverage with testing and some OWASP tools that he's releasing. I strongly recommend you go and find Ken and get his resources. So, okay, I know I'm building, but that's not enough. And then I said, okay, well, I'm including dynamic testing as part of my QA process. So I know that I'm doing good code. I'm assembling code and it's being tested. And then there were the people who said, oh, I've got interactive, right? So that means I'm really cool because it does both, right? So it's got to be better. And again, I was saying, okay, I know you're not getting 100% coverage, and I know that this isn't going to be everything. So let's go back and let's start again. Let's go and review. And this is written as if it was a waterfall method, but largely this is the same, whether you're doing continuous delivery, frequent delivery, or just like extended 18-month delivery cycles. It's just the boxes become bigger and smaller. So you start with design, right? And everybody loves that phase because it's really fun. And then I get to code, and it's still fun, right? But reality is designing it is more fun. And then you get to test it, and people stop having fun, right? And just as a reminder, for those of you that have been in this space for a while, it used to be that your best practice was you spent 2/3 of your development time was actually spent in test, right? How many people remember that one? How the heck are we going to do that when we have a DevOps world, right? Not happening, not when I'm releasing daily. So then we release, and our code was out, and it was free, and we often talked about code that escaped, right? How many of you have had code escape in the past, right? Everybody? And then support happened, and it was broken. And usually it was broken for something that wasn't necessarily security, but it was not uncommon to have a security vulnerability pop up and come through the support system. So, okay, we had this. Then what happened? So something came in, we went back into design, if we were really lucky, we went back to design, but we probably skipped it and went straight back to coding. But what I found when I was sort of digging into what was really going on was that test bit, which was I'm not having fun, was actually being replaced with less time. And when I went down, because what really happened was somebody was pissed about fixing somebody else's mistakes. They decided they knew what they had fixed, and they weren't going to test it because they knew what they were doing, and it was a stupid fix, right? And so we started to get into this kind of cycle. So even if I'm bringing in something at build, and if I'm bringing in something during some form of test, I'm still missing things. I don't have the coverage I need. And then we moved into, along came automation. Everybody said, ooh, it's better. And then we started moving really fast because along came DevOps and continuous delivery. And then all of a sudden we were going at the speed of sound, and stuff is falling on the floor. And I think it's falling on the floor because we're putting too much reliance on all of this automation-based security testing. And what I'm seeing when I talk to people, and this is not the people in this room, obviously, but when I'm talking to other people, we are losing the security skills. We're losing the security skills at the base developer. We're losing the security skills in the test teams. We're losing the security awareness amongst our product managers and our offering managers, right? Despite the great but kind of shocking tabletop session right before me, people don't understand the value of security kind of until it's too late. So there was a great article in Wired last month about Maersk. Was a lot of sort of spin and hype, but how many people read that article about Maersk with NotPetya? Okay, so it's available on the web. I strongly recommend that you go and read it. Maersk was shut down, completely and totally shut down. They lost all of their servers. They were bricks. The article goes through a lot of what they did. There's a human interest side of it. But the very interesting bit is at the end, they now get whatever they ask for from a security point of view. It costs them a lot to get there. What we need to do, right, the challenge that we have is to figure out how to get our companies and our product managers, our employers, to support, maybe not that level of investment, but bigger investment and smarter investment in order to make sure we don't get there. So, already made these points. Okay, so I was still back in me, apparently I'm old school, because I said, okay, you know, guys, what happened to code reviews? What happened to having a security test suite? Code vulnerability scans, I'm all in favor of them, don't get me wrong, I think they're great, but I don't think that they're the be all and end all. And then penetration tests. And kind of this was my reaction, the reaction I got. Okay, code reviews were old school, and quite frankly, security tests, those were too old to be even old school. They were like preschool. Vulnerability scans, that was where my automation cheering section got up and down and got really excited. And then penetration tests were kind of universally met with groans. Do I have to? It's a pain. I have to set up a production environment. I have to give them access to my environment. They're going to find things. I have to fix them. It's going to take time away from my day job, right? You know, they started to sound like my teenagers, okay? So, you know, we kept on digging, kept on trying to figure out what we've got here. You know, and I trotted out the whole, you know, the accepted wisdom about code reviews. Why do we need to do it? I need to start wandering over to this side. So, right, there is lots and lots of evidence, or at least anecdotal and documents claiming that formal code reviews are really important. And that's one of the most important things that you can do. I think it's one of many very important things you have to do. But when you dig, what are we doing with code reviews now in the days of Agile? When I started really digging, I started digging with my teams, I started digging in the literature, I started really looking around. Really what we're doing with code reviews is we're improving code quality. So we're removing defects, which is good. Defects are expensive. We don't want defects. But we're not necessarily removing security flaws. And then there was this really interesting one. Code reviews serve both technical and cultural purposes. And I thought, oh, the cultural purposes are really good. I see that. I understand why the people that do stand-up code reviews really like it, because it's a way for teams to bond and have a technical interaction that builds the relationship and we're all in this together. So, okay, let's take that back. And then this was some of the pushback that I got from teams when I said, okay, we're going to start looking at code reviews. Well, what if I don't have all the experience to do the code review? Well, you can do a code review for maintainability and for good quality, but I think I'm actually kind of with you. How in reviewing a small set of code am I going to find things if I don't have years of experience or I'm not looking at the right pieces of code? How do I do code review in a daily release cycle? And the DevOps and continuous delivery folks, you know, you can come and talk to me after, because I know you've figured out how to do it, but for the purposes of the hour that I have, we're going to leave that question up there. What if it's a new technology, right? Teams adopting Go and they've never seen Go before. How do they know how to review that? What if the review process isn't given the time it really needs? So this was one that I ran into a lot. Teams were told they had time, they had to do code reviews, but they really weren't given enough time to do anything useful. If it's tested in bits, right? So there's some evidence out there that says you can really review 100 to 200 lines of code at a time, and then you're no good at reviewing. Well, gosh, if I'm releasing something that's got 10,000 lines of code, it's going to take me a while to do that as a code review. And then really the pushback that I got from a lot of people was, look, I'm already doing this through things like static testing. Those tools I'm incorporated into my build cycle, from a security point of view, they're doing what I need to do from a code review, so I'm going to skip the code review. And I thought, oh, okay. But then I kind of also thought about it, and I thought, okay, let's go back. Maintainability of code and general defect reduction as a raison d'etre, the reason I do code reviews, get it, like it, makes total sense. Do I really think that it's going to be truly improving my security? Actually, probably not, to be totally honest. So, remember these guys. So, I went back and said, okay, we'll take out the code reviews. Tell me about your discipline, right? And we use this tool. And by implication, that means we're testing for the stuff we want, right? So, but the problem is, I'm only testing what they're right. And again, everybody knows this, and we still have to repeat it. You only test for the stuff that you test. You only find things for the stuff that you test. If you don't have coverage, then you're in trouble. So we have to do something to increase our coverage, right? So, right, we had a reiteration of this discussion, right? It's included in my build process. It's included in my QA process. I have something that does both. I'm going to skip this and keep on going. The piece that I kept coming back to with all of this was, no matter what you're doing, even if you're dealing with tools, you have to have somebody smart out there, somebody experienced, somebody who knows what the tool does, knows what the tool's coverage looks like, where the gaps are. If you don't have smart people out there, right, and smart means people that have had experience, that have, in my mind, they've got experience, they've been around, they have developed that spidey sense on where things just look funny, which is why this space for a while until AI takes over is going to remain an art and not a science. If I don't have somebody smart running this, then I'm in trouble. So now I started looking around at the average team, and the team knows that I have, teams that I have and the teams that you have, they know how to run these tools. But the fact that we still have all these findings that the tools have found, but that they haven't been fixed, or that they're being claimed as false positives, tells me that the people we have running the tools either aren't good enough in understanding what the tools are telling them, or don't have the management support to fix it. Could be both. And so I said, okay, and I know that that's not what the teams really want. And by the way, the same thing applies for all the interactive, right, which is the way of the future. That's what all my teams keep telling me. We're going to go interactive. It's going to be better. I said, no. So flashback, right? So I said, remember I said, how does it fit into your development discipline? And they told me automation. And then someone came back and said, oh yeah, right, we pen test. Okay, so good, pen testing is good. I like pen testing. And then, you know, my little wise ass in the corner reminded me that pen testers love jazz, so they were good with that. But what happens when I dig on the pen test, right? Oh, those findings that they came back with, they're all false positives. I did a good job. The pen tester really didn't know what they were testing because, you know, or they weren't finding anything because I did such a good job. Another response that I got when I was trying to figure out where we were with pen testing was, and this one was a real gem, I'm in continuous delivery, and so I don't have to do a pen test because I'm releasing every week, and I can't pen test every week. How many people have had that one raised by their teams or have used that one? And nobody? Okay. I got it a lot. So when I boiled down the answers to what I got, it was, we're using this tool name, you know, we're using whatever the tool is, and by the way, counting it up, there were probably 17 different tools across, out of, you know, the subset of teams that I was talking to. Let's just say at least 3 tools per team was what we were working with. And then there were pen tests. But I'm still, like the Pentagon and the GAO, finding that things are being released with issues. And when I compare what the answer was, there's all a push off here. Right? And I'm talking about people who care about security, right? It was always someone else's job. It was either the automation or the pen testing. And when we start digging on the pen testing team is also really dependent on the automation, because I started doing an analysis of the tools and we started digging into that. Well, 50% of the tools used by the pen testers are probably being used by my teams as well. So nowhere in all of this did anybody mention manual tests. And I think the reason was I probably wasn't using the right words. Right? I'll tell you what the words should have been. And nowhere did anybody talk about the time it takes to fix testing. What I was finding over and over again, and this was something that product managers and offering managers and release managers were telling me, was we're testing at the end of the cycle. I don't have time to fix before I release. Okay, which gets me back to, oh, me and the Pentagon, we're in the same situation. We're releasing with stuff that, you know, we would not release if we could test earlier in the cycle. So this was where we ended up with my crickets. Where I came up with is automation failing us? And so the answer is yes, ultimately. It's failing us because it's allowing teams to use automation as a crutch, right? I get to use AppScan or White Source or Black Duck or Contrast, or Qualys has some stuff, even Zap, Burp, Nessus, Nmap, you name it. I use those as they're used as a crutch. So we are letting automation fail us because we're using it as a crutch to excuse poor design, shoddy programming, right? And partial operations management. And I haven't talked about operations management at all, but for those of you that are now releasing in a SaaS mode, right, all of a sudden things get into a whole new world of crazy, because not only am I developing this stuff, I have to deliver it. The good news with SaaS is that if I can get a patch out there, I can patch much, much faster than I did otherwise. So what this reminded me of is, how many people remember shift left? Yeah, okay, so a couple of people at the back. Shift left was all the vogue for a little while, and then it kind of disappeared. So I think what my conclusion was, and what I want to start challenging you on, is that we need to start re-engaging with shift left, and we need to remove our crutch on other tools and people as being the sole purpose and focus of our testing. And we need to move to proactive controls. And proactive controls includes things like better developers, better architectures. It includes better discipline. So if I look at where I am from, so let's put this into context of the OWASP top 10, right? And so this is the new 2017 version, which has been partially rejigged from what we used to see in the past. And so all of these areas are areas that you can test with static or with dynamic or with pen testing. If you take pen testing out, all of a sudden you start having coverage gaps. All of these can be focuses for for security testing, but more importantly, and I got these in the wrong order, if I start looking at shift left, a lot of these can actually be moved much, much earlier into the development cycle with trained developers, with better access to discipline, teaching people how to write maintainable code, teaching how to look for cross-site scripting, looking for sensitive data exposure. Now, two of these lines are highlighted because they were no in my automated testing. Security misconfiguration, that one's got to be done really once you're in production, because that's where you've got your interaction between your underlying operating system, all of your other tools that you're being used. What happens, are you deploying your system as root, right? Still happens, and containers, right? How many people here deploy containers as root? Please no. Yeah, you put your hand up too soon. You got stuck on that one. I'm sure you don't. So security configuration, I grant you, that one's got to happen really in a production environment. And insufficient logging and monitoring, that one is one that's going to be very, very interesting, because that's going to depend on the environment in which you're working, right? If you are dealing with a HIPAA environment, HIPAA rules say you've got to maintain your logs for 6 years. So you have to have a different logging strategy than you have to have if you're dealing just with a normal retail versus GDPR, where GDPR, by the way, I don't know if you guys have run into this one, but I love this. GDPR says that if you say that you're keeping your logs for 90 days, you can actually get dinged if you keep them for 91. Right? When you say 90 days, they mean 90 days, no more and no less. So logging and monitoring becomes a little bit more entertaining and has to take into account the environment that you're working. So I grant you that that one's one that you need to do after the fact. So now I'm going to go back here. So now let's look at some OWASP proactive controls, which have from 2018, so they're still this year. And so how many of these are going to actually help us with the things that I've just been complaining about? Well, it turns out there's a pretty good overlap here, and I'm sure that's not a coincidence. But number one, define your security requirements. So we didn't go through this when I was having the conversations, but reasonable. How do I know what to test if I don't know what my security requirements are? So grant you that one's number one, I get it. Define security, leverage security frameworks. Make sure you've got secure database access. Databases are still a huge, huge source of issues for us. And I shouldn't have to use automated testing to have secure database access. I should teach my developers how to do that, and they should be able to make that happen. Same for encoding and escaping data. That should just be basic part of how you do your coding. You shouldn't have to have an automated tool to come and test that for you, right? I'm using the tools as a crutch to allow my teams to get shoddy about these types of basics. Security and logging, I just told you that one really depends on what your environment is. It's on the list, and it almost certainly will tie back to define your security requirements. So I strongly recommend those of you that are not using the proactive controls as a guideline for how you teach and train your developers to take a look at that, and have your developers go and read that website and read the PDF that's there. Okay. What does all of this mean, right? So we've got secure code, we've got security testing, and I've said we've got to go back to shift left. So what do I think this means? I think security testers have to be involved in the design, and that means whether it's a brand new product or whether it's a re-release. If you're not getting your security testers in there, you're missing things, because they're going to tell you, don't put this component right beside that component. All developers, regardless of what their skill set is, need to be taught security coding, and I think that's really where we're going with DevSecOps. But I think that I think that a lot of managers that I talk to seem to think that DevSecOps means that your DevOps tooling is going to do the security part for you. They're forgetting that no matter what model you're using, your developers need to understand the basics. Automated scanning should always be included in build, right? So I'm not knocking automation, but it's number 3 on my list. It's not 3 and 4. It's not numbers 1 and 2. And I think the other piece that we all need to start really reminding our teams and our managers and the people that are trying to make money off our products, if it takes time X to test something, fixing whatever you find is going to take, if you're lucky, 2X. So if you need to have a reminder on why you need to do this, that one is always a good one. So if we've done all that, are we done? And I'm going to say no. I have experienced developers, and those developers are supported, right? They've got management support, they've got the tools they need, the resources they need, they've got the ability to say, no, it's going to take me this amount of time to develop something that is secure and to test it. I've got automation as one tool of many, and I'm still doing my pen testing, but what I need to do is I need to start shifting that pen testing part left as well. I need to move my security testing out of the sole domain of the pen testing teams and back into my development teams. So I've heard talk about bug bounty. How many people here run bug bounty programs for their offerings? Really? Not very many. Okay. How many, and is that, so let's ask, is that because you are concerned about doing this externally and potentially bad press? Is it because you're worried about the cost of it? Are there any reasons why other people are not doing bug bounty? Not a priority? Crickets? I've got my crickets back. What I'm starting to push towards, what I've actually seen be very successful, is allowing teams to test as if they are a hacker. And so what do I mean by that? And this is where I want to go. So, go here. So the challenge is, and I want you to think about what would happen if you tried to implement this in your environment. But this is the challenge that I would like every one of us to think about and to try to figure out how to do within our environments, which is once a month, the entire dev test organization gets a day, make it to be a Friday, and that day, they are the hackers, right? These are your developers. They know where all of your bodies are buried, more than anybody, certainly better than anybody outside. So get them a production environment if you can, get them an exact replica if you can't, and let these guys and gals go and hack. There's a hall pass, right? So nobody gets punished if it was a bug that they committed, right? But give awards to your teams. Now, I know how my teams work, right? It's not inconceivable that some of those, the jazz hand guy will put some bugs in so that he can then get the bug bounty reward so he can get the Starbucks card. So you've got to be sensible how you implement that, but do internal bug bounties. Why would you consider spending money on an external hacker who doesn't know your environment, who is just in it for whatever money or reward you're going to give it? Get your internal people to do it. They're invested in the code, they want secure code, and they're certainly not going to say no to a night out to the pub afterwards based on the success of whatever your team is. Do the bug bounty by team instead of by individual, if that makes sense. But this is, and maybe I'm being really naive on this one, but this one I think actually has a lot of potential for a lot of the teams that I deal with. If nothing else, I can go back to the cultural bonding bit of code reviews, right? It's a variation on a code review. Now, if you really, really want to be gutsy, get your operations team to sort of, make sure that your production environment is running more or less smoothly, but get your operations team to come and detect and respond, and now you've got a red team, blue team going on. That's really cool, and that's one way to start doing a variation, by the way, on incident response, which we just talked about in the session before mine. So my question for you, and I get that I'm between you and beer, and I get that it's been a long day. Do you think you can make this work in your environment? I don't know if has anybody tried this in their environment? Did I hear a yes? I did hear a yes. At the very, very back. Can you stand up and yell what happened? What was your experience?
We didn't get much traction.
Okay, and why didn't you get the traction?
Maybe the prices were too small.
I can't hear.
Maybe the rewards were too small.
Oh, the rewards were too small. Okay, what were your rewards?
$50 Amazon gift cards.
50, okay, $50 and it was too small? Wow. You've got discriminating developers. Okay. Anybody else tried it? No, okay. Yes. Was there somebody over there putting it? Yeah. Can you, what was your experience with this?
It was very positive.
Okay.
We combined the security organization and the IT organization. We had focused events, and we found things we wouldn't have otherwise found.
Okay. So
we fed them. That seems to be oversupplied. $50 gift cards were not included.
yeah,
Pretty loud. We fed them. $50 gift cards were not required, and it generated a lot of chatter. When we had the next event, we had more people kind of say, hey, we want to do it. And we had to reduce the scope to bring in certain IT teams. So we're continuing that, we're evolving it, but it's absolutely something that changes the way people think. And hopefully, if they don't find anything necessarily significant in that event, when they go back to their day job, they're thinking just a little bit differently.
So we are from the Visa cybersecurity team. So, but I know that there are, so we have very different types of teams working in the bigger organization. So there are product teams and business teams, but our product teams are starting to get more involved. And for example, our DDP team, which is the developer platform team, they have a dedicated day called the security day where they perform, tasks like these, and it has really helped to gain that traction, and other product teams are following it, and hopefully someday it gets to the business teams as well.
Anybody else back here while I'm like all the way back here want to comment? No? Okay, everybody's ducking. Okay, so I'm glad to hear your, and I didn't get to look at your name, but I'm glad to hear these positive experiences. I think food versus money is always an interesting playoff for developers. I know that if we fed my developers, that would help a lot. But what I would like to do is I would really like to challenge you to figure out how to do this in a big scale or a small scale with your teams, because I think that if we don't get creative with how we give our developers and our testers more ownership in what they're doing, we're going to continue battling the tool isn't good enough, I'm missing stuff with the tool, I'm going to continue just spinning on all of these things that we've been spinning on, only in different ways, right? How do we re-engage the developers? How do we make security thinking a critical and an inseparable part of what we're doing? This is something that I've seen used really positively with a couple of different clients and teams that I work with. I think that it has a lot of potential. I think that I would love to run one of these and have nothing be found, because that would be two very, very potentially interesting pieces of data. One, my team is no good at all, right? In which case I've got an issue, right? Or two, they have been continuously improving their skill set to the point where what they are doing is they're driving down a lot of that stuff. And then with making it a competition between teams, all of a sudden I'm going to start driving in the finding and remediating of those far more insidious, hard to find bugs, the ones that just kill you when something happens, right? The ones that you spend 4 weeks in an RCA trying to figure out. So that's what I'm trying to, that's what I'd like to challenge you guys to do. I'd love to come back to LASCON next year and talk to people and find out how they do it. I'd love to see if you bring any of your operations or incident response people in and how they deal with that, right? What are your incident response people going to look at? Well, gosh, they better be looking at those logs, right? They might learn that all of a sudden checking the logs of who logged in once a week is not going to catch stuff, but if they know that there's something going on, they will know what they're looking for. They're going to start paying more attention to it. You're going to improve your operational discipline as well. So, okay. And I thought that perhaps, the next time we could talk about it for what's happening with incident response is it failing us? Because remember, these things, they all go together. This picture was in the draft of the NIST cybersecurity framework. It didn't make it into the final, which is really disappointing because it's actually a really great picture of how to visualize what we're trying to do. Everything that I've talked about is trying to drive down things on the prevention side of it, right? Culminating with those testing to help you with the detect, because I want to detect before something happens actually in the real world. But assuming I'm detecting in the real world, all of a sudden I've got this whole big reaction side of it that I have to deal with. My job is to make it so that I don't have to react. I don't want to react. I want everything fixed. I want that red part of that great big triangle to flat. Okay. So I'm going to, that was what I wanted to talk to you about, but I did want to put, and I've got my Gmail, if you guys, anybody wants to talk, but I wanted to just put up one thing, because I noticed we had a lot of people here, and how many people here have heard of the Cyber Patriot? Okay, nowhere near as many as I would like. So one of the things that I also would like to do is to challenge everybody to go. Cyber Patriot is about to kick the first competition this is for middle and high school kids. I call it ethical defending, ethical hardening. But this is how we are, one of the ways that we as an industry have found to help get kids interested in security, in cybersecurity, and training kids on how to do this while they're still in high school, so that when they hit university and then they come and code for you, they've been through these competitions where they've had to go and harden all sorts of different servers, and if they make it to nationals, they actually will be in a red team, blue team situation. Cyber Patriots always in the need of mentors, right? They need smart people. These kids have grown up on Windows, right? They struggle when they see Linux. They need people to go and help them learn Linux so that they know how to harden it. I'd strongly encourage you to go to the website and register as a mentor and go and work with some local high school kids on helping them with their Cyber Patriot activities. I've been doing this now for 5 years, and it is hugely rewarding. And that, aside from what we're trying to do to drive the better maturity with the actual developers, this is how we get the next generation. So as my final public service announcement, please go consider registering and participating with Cyber Patriot. Thank you very much for your attention. I know it's been a long day. I really appreciate everybody staying awake, and I will be outside afterwards. And if you want to actually talk about anything, point out where I was wrong, but you didn't want to do it in public, that's fine. I'd love to hear it. So.
Thank you.